Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Today, we welcome back Jessie Mahoney, pediatrician and certified coach. Today's Kevin MD article is Why Self-Care Must Become Medicine's New Standard. Jessie, welcome back to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So tell us what this article is about.
Well, this article, I don't like the word self-care. And I think that's really where it comes from because people often say, I'm going to take a self-care day, and then they justify what self-care is. And I think many people, when we use this word self-care, is massages or
Hmm.
treats. And so I had in my mind this idea that self-care should be like the standard of care. I really
Yeah.
like that phrase. And yet, for people who work in medicine and physicians especially, but I actually think anyone who works in medicine, we don't see it that way. We see it as like it's also maybe your to-do list. And so
Yeah.
the reason I wrote this article was to be a little feisty and express my frustration and as sort of saying it's self-care. Like when we getting your teeth cleaned is not self-care, or charging came to mind this idea of like charging an electric car. People ask about that all the time. Like, can I charge? Where can I charge? And we just consider that something that we do. And I think that this idea of taking care of ourselves, it for people who are working in medicine shouldn't be an anomaly. It shouldn't be a special thing. It should literally be what's considered standard of care. And when we have to give this explanation or this effort and energy around, I'm going to do my self-care and prioritizing my self-care. While I also recognize that that is not what we do, and so therefore it does take effort to do
Hmm.
it. But my hope is that ultimately it will go beyond just this idea of self-care and be really our responsibility. And perhaps also for those people who work within institutions, everyone's responsibility. I know that, many institutions want you to do all your appointments on your day off, whatever day off that might be. Right? Even if you work full time, you could still do it on your day off if you're a shift worker. And this idea that, we want our patients to come in and see us, but we don't go see our doctors. And that shouldn't be self-care. It really, I mean, it is standard of care for every adult, including those providing the care to care for themselves. So that's really where the message came from, and wanting to really raise the idea of it's our responsibility,
Hmm.
ours and our organizations, if they want us to be there and not drop dead of heart attacks and cancer and all the things. We know that physicians generally are not the healthiest people because we don't take care of ourselves.
In medicine, instead of self-care, it glorifies self-sacrifice, right?
Yes.
And it's always been that way as long as I can remember.
Yep.
Do you feel like the tide is turning a little bit? Because I know we've been talking about issues similar to this on our many episodes together, and I talked to other physicians as well. Do you feel like the tide is turning?
I do think the tide is turning, but it's turning, and maybe that's a bit the point of this article, is that it's turning to, okay, let's use a lot of energy to advocate for why we need self-care. And
Hmm.
I would like it to be the default, not something that we're advocating for. And so it's, shifting, we're kind of this self-sacrifice to, okay, well, now we are going to advocate and be really have boundaries about self-care, when really the next step would sort of be it's the standard, it's
Yeah.
what we do. And it's really what we expect, interestingly, not our patients to do, right? I am primary care, so we tell patients all the time, take care of yourself, do these things, you should exercise, you should do this.
Hmm.
And we don't tell them, oh, take a self-care day, or, you know, make a big deal of it. And yet we have to for ourselves because it's not considered standard. It's considered an anomaly. But I would say we are making progress. One of the things that I have found is that so many doctors have trouble putting on their oxygen mask first or doing their
Yeah.
own self-care.
Hmm.
And so can you just do it also? Like, are you equally important or equally worthy? And I think hopefully this idea of being humans, all humans need healthcare. All humans need to move their bodies. All humans need to eat healthy. All humans need to sleep. And so it's interesting that we've had to call it out as self-care.
Now, you work for different health organizations. Just from across the spectrum of where you've worked, what you've seen, how are different places prioritizing self-care?
Well, it's interesting. I'm thinking it's funny. I don't know that any healthcare organization is truly prioritizing it yet, but it's almost done as a to do. Like
Hmm.
make sure you see your doctor, make sure that you do these things, or they will offer, sometimes health coaches, for
Hmm.
example, or everyone has different names for it, but employee assistance or employee well-being and so there are resources there, but the system's not inherently set up for us to have time to do them. And I still don't think, while the culture is changing, that there is acceptance for it. If you said I need, an hour on Thursdays to meet with my therapist, in most systems, that would be difficult to coordinate unless Thursday afternoon was your
Hmm.
afternoon off. And I'm making that up obviously as an example, but I think the language is there and people understand it's important, but it's still kind of seen as a checkbox.
Yeah.
In non-medical disciplines like the law, my husband works in the law, they actually get, discounts on their insurance if you do X, Y, and Z, and they have these check boxes and they, encourage people to do that. And I'm betting that the companies that provide the insurance for the care we provide also do that. But sort of weaving physicians and healthcare providers in. I also come from a very strong belief that when we do these things ourselves, we've gotten our mammogram, we exercise, we practice mindfulness, we do yoga. It's much easier to advocate for your patients to do
Hmm.
that. When you practice lifestyle medicine, it's much easier to explain it and much easier to give people ways and thought patterns that would help them change their habits. And so there's actually tremendous benefit for the organizations if they are willing to take that step. And I think you're 100% right that the tide is turning. But I think we also have to support each other in doing
Yeah.
it. I think that while we all think it's important, then if it means that you have to cover or this happens, then it's there's conflicting feelings about
Yeah.
it. I don't think anybody doesn't want to do it, but the way the system is set up, there isn't wiggle room for people to take care of themselves. And so then it has to become this fight thing to be able to get self-care.
How much of that culture of self-sacrifice is because medicine self-selects those who sacrifice the most, right? The people who get into medical school, the people who get into these competitive residencies tend to be the ones who self-sacrifice the most, right? So
Mhm.
in order to create that sea change of culture, I think it's gonna be difficult because everyone who becomes a doctor, they're really groomed in that culture of self-sacrifice.
Right. And I think the word you just used there is the right one, groomed, because I think that's a really difficult question. Did we start out this way? Were we groomed this way? I believe there's sort of a combination. Many of us are, high achievers who were always the over responsible one and always, so we began sacrificing very early on, and you can't get into medicine if you didn't do that. But then we also have this conflicting knowledge that these other things are really important. And so I think that we are at a tipping point where
Hmm.
people are recognizing that you can't continue to self-sacrifice forever and ever, and that does have a cost. And I might say, just like our patients not doing their preventive care, and I'm going to call self-care now preventive care, like mental health preventive care, physical health preventive care. When we don't do that, then we have people out with cancer and people
Yeah.
out with other long-term autoimmune diseases and whatever else, right? And it's not that it's, you don't do X and Y happens, but just population studies would show us that. And so the downstream cost of it is huge. And
Hmm.
so hopefully we can begin to say, wow, if we actually take care of ourselves up front and we encourage our colleagues to do the same, it will in time be better for everyone. But that's always hard to convince
Yeah.
people to do, no matter what it is. It's hard to convince our patients. But I think that as physicians, we do know, we know better, really.
Yeah.
It's just the tug of war and the way that we were raised in medicine. And culturally, I think many of us were raised in our families that way. And that's not to blame our families, it's just the way the types of people who go into medicine are sacrificers. I think though, to me it's I like to change the language. So is it caring? Like, we are also carers and we're also healers, and you can't care and heal from empty. Just,
Hmm.
and maybe taking it out of the emotional realm. I think when you get to like a charging a battery, right? When the
Yeah.
battery is out, or it takes time to charge it. Like when your phone dies, you actually have to wait, and there's this lag, and that is less efficient than charging it before it's empty
Sure.
or filling your gas tank. And so this idea of recharging and refilling and not getting below empty and not causing ourselves harm. And that's where I think if we don't consider it a problem to plug in our cars or our phones or get gas, I mean, actually, sometimes we're like, I don't have time for that, but we make the time. And
Yeah.
this should be similar to that.
So, what are some simple ways physicians can take care of themselves?
Yeah. I mean, the basics of, I would call it kind of lifestyle medicine, but I think we make it really hard. We're
Yeah.
all or none people. And so I have to do all this exercise. So some people, have to do it according to a schedule or a ritual. My thought is tiny little moments can make a big difference. And
Hmm.
so and this sounds a little rote, but can you park a little bit farther, or
Hmm.
can you take a 5-minute break? I really like to think about it as managing your energy. And so if you get to the end of the day and you're just done, you don't make good choices then. And so how can you put little moments in your day that help you feel better? Breathing with your patients is one that's super simple. 5 minutes of mindfulness, or we often say a moment of mindfulness. One moment of mindfulness shifts your physiology. And when you are not depleted, we make better choices about eating and exercising. And if it takes that, you can also really begin to think like, well, if I do this myself, I'm going to be able to help my patients. So if you're in the realm that that is more important to you,
Hmm.
use your brain for you, but make it easy. There's tons of science about relationships, and there's tons of science about nature. And so, can you just stop for 5 minutes on your way home from a shift? I do a lot of yoga and teach yoga, and there's a lot of work in restorative yoga. One pose can be helpful. And so, for shift workers, for example, if
Hmm.
you do feet up the wall, it actually resets your physiology 5 minutes, and it will help you sleep better, for example. And so, I think sometimes we overcomplicate it. I don't have time to go to a yoga class. I don't have time. I don't know what breath work is. And
Hmm.
it's take 3 deep breaths, or strategically set yourself up to have to go pick something up at lunch. Or
Sure.
I used to order myself a coffee
Yeah.
and I would pay for it on my phone. So therefore I would feel guilty and I would go pick it up. And I remember my medical assistant one day saying, you don't have to rush to go get that. I'll get it for you. And the whole point was not for the coffee.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was
It's a walk.
to get myself to go outside. And so I think we have to work with our brains and know what motivates us. And also enlist help. So have a colleague go for a 5-minute walk with you. Have your spouse go for a 5-minute walk with you. If you have kids, they're exceptional at mindfulness. Like I
Hmm.
think we think I have to start training for a marathon to have good health care. And instead just do one thing.
Hmm.
And that one thing can make a huge difference. Tiny little things.
How about healthcare organizations? If they're listening to you here, what are some things that they can do to support the idea of required maintenance? Is it forcing doctors to take their paid time off? Like, what are some small things that they can do?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I do think that if they incentivized getting your own care and made it super easy, whether we had often toyed around when I was doing institutional wellness with on your birthday every year, you had a day to do your appointments, or you could have 2 half days to do your
Hmm.
appointments that were paid time to get that done. It would actually benefit healthcare organizations. And making it accepted is the other thing. Like it not only encouraging, which I think that everyone is kind of at that point, but making it easy, making
Hmm.
sure that there's honestly enough staffing so that you can backfill, and that when you take that time to go to your appointment, someone else isn't actually suffering or struggling. Because I think that's the real, people say, well, I can't let my colleagues down, so therefore I can't go get my colonoscopy. Although I would say if you wait and you have colon cancer, you're really going to let your colleagues down. But our brains aren't thinking that way because we're so compressed. And so could we have just a little bit more space in the system? And then, a lot of healthcare organizations have, for example, gotten providers to the Calm app or gotten
Hmm.
providers something. But sometimes if there's no time to use it, it has to actually be more of a full a full plan that isn't just here's this thing, you figure out how to make it
Yeah.
happen. I also think, and we've talked a lot about effective wellness, and coaching is something that really, really helps people. I remember having a conversation with one of my wellness colleagues, and it's like, well, why is coaching better than educating people on the plant-based diet or getting them, physical trainer? And my thought is that coaching actually is what allows you to eat a plant-based diet if you decide you want to. It
Hmm.
allows you to stop drinking. It allows you to make more intentional choices. So you're not a victim of all these things. And then you can decide. Obviously, we're not going to fix everything overnight, but you can decide what matters most to you. And so I really do think we have tons of evidence that coaching is really helpful for physicians. And so and I would say not within the system coaching with another agenda. It's not like healthcare executive leadership coaching
Hmm.
where you are within the system, being coached by someone who has another agenda.
Sure.
It's really helping people have, we talk about life coaching, but I would say it's life, career, relationship, parent coaching, and allowing people to find the things that work for them, maybe offering a fund where you could then fund personal development or you could fund personal health and wellness. I think that that would be another way that would allow people to do the things that was really helpful to them. Because I think if you can talk the talk, but if you don't offer the back end support, nobody's going to do it.
We're talking to Jessie Mahoney, pediatrician and certified coach. Today's Kevin MD article is Why Self-Care Must Become Medicine's New Standard. Jessie, as always, let's end with some take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience.
My take-home message would really be that, we all need to invest in ourselves, not just sort of pick up the pieces when we
Hmm.
fall apart, and that is actually caring more and really our responsibility. And in a perfect world, our organizations would help support it. But until they do, and maybe they will and maybe they won't, we really can do that ourselves, and we can create a culture where that's okay for other people to do it. And perhaps we could think about it as this should be standard of care for our patients, and it should be standard of care for ourselves, with the hope also that if we do it, we'll be much better advocates for others to do it. We believe in preventive care, and so practicing what we preach is going to be the most helpful for us to be able to stay in
Hmm.
medicine and to be able to do what we train so hard to do, presuming that's what we want to do.
Jessie, as always, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and insight. Thanks again for coming back on the show.
Thanks again for having me.